Would everyone please rise for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll open the special call meeting of the county council. Purpose of, I got a little bit of business for the health department. Gather information from Baker Tilly on 2 or 3 different things. So that's still.
We will open our commissioner meeting or the special call meeting on July 31st, 2025.
So, Tammy's printing the salary ordinance that we talked about for the health department. I assume that's why you're here. Is that right? The salary ordinance for the part-time help.
Yes. I don't, there's salary ordinance, so I'm assuming that the salary ordinance is prepared.
Yes, yes.
I have spoken to Kayla. She is agreeable to, it's a much simpler solution that the council has offered with Kayla remaining on as the part-time employee. At $65 an hour is a much easier solution, and it would be as needed.
Under the direction of.
Under the direction of the board. With the understanding that as soon as we have someone hired and trained, her temporary employment would end.
Do you have any questions on that discussion? We kind of talked about it the last meeting. So Tammy, we need to wait for that to be printed, or can we go
You can
ahead?
go ahead.
So is everybody aware, $65 an hour part-time hurricane expense? Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor, or I need a motion, I guess.
I'll make a motion to part-time salary amendment, $65 per hour for the attendance first. Second.
Motion from Tom, second by Matt, to approve the salary ordinance, part-time health department at $65 an hour till a permanent nurse is hired, correct? Discussion,
Hurricane, everybody in line, big, ideas for a full timer yet? Nobody showed up?
Please send out. It's fine.
Okay.
Good night, Mark.
Not what I wanted to hear. Okay.
Thank you.
any other questions or discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carry. So we'll guess, wait a minute for Tammy to get back. Move on. You guys have a good trip up here this morning? Rain all the way?
Not quite all the way, but pretty good for that for me. Yeah.
I was over at Monticello, I think it rained all night over there. Probably did here, I don't know. Did over there.
No, I worked anyway, but still won't anyway.
Oh,
It was still raining when I left this morning. So I guess, you guys wanna, I don't know who's first, who, we don't care probably, or however you wanna do it, what you guys can. Or come up together, whatever you guys wanna do.
Whoever's got good news, go first.
I'll sit down. Good morning.
Guess I do introduce you, Susan, I think you've been here enough.
I've been here, I can introduce myself. Start.
Apologize for that.
That's okay.
Those
Just here, Mark. Mhm.
Fine, this one.
yeah, it's fine.
Great size for your.
Morning. Are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay, great. Good morning, council and commissioners. I'm Susan Cowan from Baker Tilly. I believe I saw most of you a little earlier this year in March. We talked about government financing. So after that meeting, decided to move ahead with a comprehensive financial plan. So rather than what we've done the past few years in a budget sort of mindset where we look at what's going on this year, what's going on next year, the CFP looks out a little bit further than that. We look at 3 years of historical information, we look at the current year, and then we go out another 4 years with estimates of receipts and disbursements for those periods to determine what the long-term financial health of the county might look like. We have some other information, trends we've noticed, obviously right now with the completion of the legislative session. We have a lot of information and comments here relative to those items that were passed and what's coming up as far as governmental financing in the next 3 to 5 years. So we have some discussion of that here in the report as well. We've looked at your major property tax funds. We've looked at your anything funded by gas taxes, motor vehicle highway, local road street, the statewide 911. We have your landfill fund in here. So it's not all of your funds, but it's generally going to cover your main operating funds up through the next 4 years. So page 1 begins with what we call the executive summary, where we talk about trends, things that are coming up, things that we notice in funds that you may want to, a quick summary here verbally may be easier than trying to digest all of the numbers. Part of this does get kind of numbers dense. So we'll try to hit the high points and make sure you know what the trends that we're seeing so you can recognize those in the numbers going through. So the first thing is, again, the legislation, what was called Senate Enrolled Act 1 that is now part of the Indiana Code. There's some major changes there to both property tax and local income tax that will affect the county. Right away, we expect this year there to be changes in net assessed value. It's not to say that there will be no growth in net assessed value, but there may be slow growth in net assessed value. That is because there are new deductions and new credits that have never been in place before, primarily on your 1% properties. Over the next 6 years, they're stepping in calculations that will eventually make it so that no 1%, meaning homestead residential property, will be taxed on more than 1/3 of its gross assessed value. Currently, those properties under the current calculations are anywhere from 50 to 60% of their gross assessed value ends up at the net. So if we're dropping from 50% of gross assessed for tax value to 1/3 of gross assessed for tax value, I'm sure you can see where that will mean that there's likely to be decreases overall. There are also new credits on tax bills for homeowners that will further decrease the amount of revenue that you receive. There are new credits available on 2% properties, on your ag properties. They've also changed the way in which those ag properties are valued. So in the past, 2% properties were taxed at their full gross assessed value, and they had a 2% property tax cap. Starting this year, there will be a 6% decrease in that gross assessed value, a 6% deduction upfront. That again will be stepped in an additional 6% over the next 6 years to be, those properties eventually will be taxed on no more than 2/3 of their gross assessed value, where previously they were on 1% or on 100%. So again, another trend downward, especially if you have a lot of agricultural based properties. And that it's not just agricultural, it's also properties that we term second type of residential, like second homes, rental homes, assisted living facilities. Those are also all considered 2% properties. Whereas those were previously taxed at their full gross assessed value, there will be reductions starting this year and over the next 6 years. There's also been changes to business personal property and how those changes can also affect your net assessed value as well. There's a a depreciation floor that's been removed and some valuations that have been changed as well. Also, max levy growth quotient, there was talk of making it so that there would be zero growth in levies. They didn't opt to do that, I think, because they did the tax deductions as well, the changes to net assessed value, they didn't change the cap. So this year they have certified the cap again at 4%. This is the third year in a row they will have limited the cap to 4%. Previously, it was limited for 24 and 25. Now it's limited for 26. They currently have not said anything going forward, other than that it will go back to the standard calculation up to a 6% cap. That's what was always in place previously. That's not to say that anything that's currently in place could be changed next year or the following year or the year after that. But for right now, we can only go on what we know that they've said. So another thing that they eliminated, it hadn't been applicable to you before, but there was a method under which if your net assessed value growth was greater than the growth across the state average growth, you could apply for a 3-year levy appeal to increase your levy. After this year, that's no longer available. So even if you got to the point where you had big amounts of net assessed value increase, you wouldn't be able to increase your levy. That's been a way a lot of faster growing communities have been able to sort of true up their levy to their net assessed value, but that is no longer available. This is the last year that a unit could do that if eligible. So those are the main things with property tax. There were a set of estimates created by the Legislative Services Agency, which are showing anticipated additional loss because of this new legislation. They've estimated currently for this year or incoming budget year, and then the 2 following years. They currently think that in 26, because of the changes to like I said, the increased deductions on 1%, the increased deductions on 2%, they believe that Newton County would lose an additional $425,000 on top of the circuit breaker loss that you already see. This is on top of page 2. That's where I have that number 425,000. So what we've done is we've taken that 425,000 and we've allocated it across your property tax funds to show where additional revenue loss might be coming. And on each individual schedule, we show that, and I'll be sure to point it out again when we get to those individual schedules. The other major change has been local income tax. Will be local income tax. Those don't start immediately. Local income tax changes will not start until calendar year 2028. In 2027, you as county council will have to make a decision what levels of lit you will be adopting going forward, as the current setup will be completely erased. Current lit will change, and the new setup is somewhat different than current. Currently, you have certified shares, local income tax. You also could have had an economic development income tax, a public safety income tax. If you chose to use property tax to supplement your or local income tax to supplement property tax, you could have. Going forward, those types go away. You as a county council will have the ability to specifically for the county unit adopt up to 1.2% rate on AGI. That is for county general services. So that would replace the certified shares that you currently have in place. Currently, your certified shares is distributed to you, townships, cities, towns, schools, libraries, other units within the county. This going forward up to this 1.2% is just for your unit, just for the county unit. So you're not sharing that part with any other units. But there are other types that you can also choose to adopt for the other units. There will be a fire protection and EMS lit. It's not sheriff, that's not police, it's only fire protection and EMS. If you choose to adopt that at a rate of up to 0.4% on all of the AGI in the county, that primarily goes to fire districts, fire territories, and municipal fire departments. If you choose, you can also distribute it to township fire departments and volunteer fire departments. So currently townships receive some of the certified shares. Going forward, there will not be certified shares for townships. If you chose, you could put something like this EMS and fire lit in place to allow them to pay for fire contracts. Because that's, I know what a lot of units, townships use their lit for, is to pay for fire contracts or support their fire departments. So you could do that. That is distributed, currently all lit is distributed based upon relative proportion of levy. So whatever a single unit's proportion of levy is to all the levy in the county, that's the proportion of local income tax that they get. Going forward, it will be distributed for the Spire and EMS based upon a calculation of square mileage of service area and population in that service area. So a department that covers a larger area would receive a larger proportion of that 0.4% of local income tax for fire. If you chose not to do that for townships, the other option you have is non-municipal lit. You can adopt up to 0.2% on specific types of units. By looking at your budget order, I believe Newton County would have townships and libraries that would fall into this determination. Schools no longer are considered in local income tax distributions at all after 2028. There's nothing specific for lit that would go to schools. This 0.2% though has to be divided up based upon type. It cannot be no more than 0.5 per type of unit. So if you only have schools and townships, you can adopt up to 0.1. Half of that would go to schools or to library, half of it would go to townships. And if I said schools, I apologize, it's libraries and townships. So you could either choose to supplement fire protection at townships with that fire and EMS, or with non-municipal, or with both, if you so chose, depending on rate. Your current rate, which I have in a couple pages, is a 1% across the whole county. It looks as though you may be able to keep it at that 1% and satisfy and give people what they need based within these types. You may have to make some fluctuations, but it seems that you should be able to potentially get there. The other type then for cities and towns, we haven't addressed that yet. The main determination is what the population of a city and town is. If they're over 3,500 in population, they get to adopt their own lit rate up to 1.2%. Looking at 2020 census numbers, there didn't appear to be communities in Newton County that are over 3,500. So then you as county council would adopt for small municipalities under 3,500. That is again up to another 1.2% if you chose. I did the math. If you did the full 1.2%, that's roughly 10 times more than what they're currently receiving in local income tax. So all of these numbers together can be a max of 2.9. Since you're currently at that 1% rate, you would not have to get close to that 2.9% max to somehow duplicate or get close to duplicating what units are currently getting if they need that to continue to function. Now, you don't have special purpose lit. That's a special type of lit that's written in Indiana code. That one would maintain and stay in place, but like I said, that doesn't apply to Newton County. So
Susan,
yeah.
if I could, on the municipal rate, is that the council would have to adopt that
Yes.
for the?
Yes, the council has to adopt for municipalities. And the only ones that could ever adopt for their own would be the over 3,500, which you don't have, so.
So then is it only the residents within the city limits of those towns that pay that, or is it everybody in the county?
When it's small municipals, it's the whole county. If it was a large municipality, theirs would only be on the residents in that city
So
or in that larger community. So since these are smaller communities, it's on the AGI of
every
the
resident
county.
in the county.
Yeah,
Pay,
yes.
it's not a lot of money.
Yeah, every resident would be included. That's what I was getting ready to say. In your case, based upon these types of lit, it wouldn't be parsed out by different areas, that all of these would be applicable to the AGI of the entire county. So if the libraries and the townships want lit, they have to come to you and petition the summer before, by July 1st of 2027. They have to come to you and ask for the local income tax. You can choose to give it to just the ones that come talk to you and present you a resolution that they're asking for it, or you can choose to give it, like all but 2 townships show up, you can go ahead and choose to give it to all of the townships, or if only one library shows up, you can choose to give it to both and not just one. Yes, sir.
So if I heard you right, so it's basically a blanket for everybody,
Mhm.
right, at a percentage, and then the amount they would receive would be based on assessed value.
It's no longer assessed value, it's population.
Now it's population.
Now it's population.
100% population.
Yep, now it's population.
And then one other question, so you said that townships will no longer be in certified share, starting when?
In January 1, 2028. So in 27, you'll be ramping up to this new status, this new layout that comes in the beginning of 2028. So that by October 1st, the county would have to make the decisions and adopt what you're putting in at what rate So they can begin distributing in January the following year.
October 1st of 27.
Yes, yes, October 1st of 27 to begin January 1 of 28. The way that the legislation currently reads, that will stay in place unless you make changes. Each year annually, you can make changes up till October 1st. Through, I believe it is 2030. After 2031, you have to do this every year. There has to be a lit adoption every year. Well, it would expire at the end of the year if the county council doesn't take action and put new lit rates in place for the following year. So you have a couple years to get used to this new layout, and then afterwards, after 2031, you have to start doing it every year. So the next page shows examples, and we have used your current county AGI, well, the AGI that's based on for 25. Examples of, for the county portion, what varying rates could bring you as far as revenue. So as we mentioned, in 2025, that's the current rate. You're currently getting 2.992 million in lit, your certified shares, just for the county portion. So if you were to adopt, the first block is 0.6%, second block is 0.65, the bottom block is 0.7. It shows the varying rates, levels of revenue potentially. Now, can AGI change between now and then? Yes, it can. It can, if employment stays fairly good and wages stay where they're at, you could expect it to potentially go up. If there's any sort of economic interruption that, increases unemployment, you could potentially see that AGI go down. So you may have to, at that point, pick a different rate of lit to adopt to try to maintain your revenues or be where you need what would want to be revenue wise for that. So that's why I was saying it appears that currently the county would not have to adopt the full 1.2% to replace your revenues that you're currently bringing in.
Well, not a big difference.
In this case, right, so you may still be able to maintain a 1% rate across the county and still get fairly similar amounts of revenue to the involved entities. And I think it's because you don't have a municipality that's over 3,500. Most of those units are finding that to get anywhere near what they have to adopt the full 1.2. Well, that immediately puts you at least halfway to that 2.9. So, and that also makes it easier just across the board for you, because if for each municipality you have that's over 3,500, you could potentially have a separate lit rate. So in this case, across the county, you will have one lit rate. You'll maintain that one. You won't have to have multiple ones to worry about. So when we go back to the cash flow schedules, this is the number that we have assumed. So, in your case, it's already going into your general fund, so it will just be a different new revenue line in the same general fund. If you'd had public safety or edit or any of those, it would have made it a little bit more complicated. It is a fairly simple scenario here. The next page just shows currently, like as I mentioned, your 1% lit rate, that 1% certified shares that you're sharing with other units in the county. So yours in effect after 28 will still kind of be and look just like your current certified shares. It'll just be adopted in different pieces. It'll likely equal around that 1%. There'll be the portion that's a county. If you do the fire and EMS, if you do the township, the small town, it'll just be in each of those different pieces together instead of just deciding on flat one. And then below I show what your lit receipts have been since 2021. There was a little bit of decrease in 2022. That was still from fallout of how they made changes to deal with COVID. For 1 year, they took 14 months of receipts into account, and then the next year they took 10 into account. So that's why there was some artificially low numbers that came in there in 2022. We've come back out of that now. We're back to regular 12-month collections and distributions. The next page where we start to talk about circuit breaker credits. So currently, the county is experiencing about 1.7% circuit breaker loss. That's because tax rates are fairly low. You're not, and this is on property tax, you're not losing a lot currently. So the blue bars in the graph at the bottom show your net property tax. The red is the line that you're losing currently for circuit breaker. So the net property tax that you're receiving is for example, in 25, 8.13 million, you're losing like 139,000 in circuit breaker. However, going forward, 26, 7, 8, and 9, we're showing the blue bar, which is your net, that red, which is based upon what would be normal circuit breaker, and then the yellow bar above is that 425,000, which is the extra likely due to Senate Enrolled Act 1. So you can see that where you have about 8.1 million receipts. We expect those receipts to decline a bit for the incoming year for 26 because of that additional loss. And we do think that 425 is a worst case scenario number. It could come in somewhere less than that. When we get actual net assessed values, which everybody across the state is struggling with that right now because of these changes, we get a better idea of where that circuit breaker might go for next year. Those aren't technically actually calculated till next year in the spring, but that will be sort of the first kind of bellwether to see how those net NAVs come in for this year compared to last year. Like we said, we don't know that it will mean negative growth. It could mean slowed positive growth from where it was originally. The next page just shows, based upon that current circuit breaker in 25, across the county, all units in the county lose about 542,000 to the circuit breaker caps. Of that, the county units share is about a quarter of that. That amount was the 139 that was on the previous page for 25. Then page 7, showing over time the relation between the county's tax rate and your net assessed value. This is the relationship that we would expect to see because it's an inverse relationship. Generally, as tax rates or as net assessed values increase, tax rates decrease, which that's what we're seeing. As your net assessed value has gone up, based upon, that 4% annual growth in levy, you've been able to each year progressively bring your tax rate down. Now, if we do see a contraction of your net assessed value, if we see those numbers come down, not just slow growth, but a evening out or a decline, that's when we'll start to see the tax rates go back up because you're going the opposite direction. And it really depends on what the net balance is there between what exactly, because we're getting a 4% increase in levy this year. So if your NAV were to grow around 4% or more, you should see that tax rate maintain or decrease. If you have less than 4% growth or negative growth, you're going to see the tax rate go the opposite direction. And that's why we experience the circuit breaker loss, that it gets greater, because higher circuit breaker loss puts properties at their tax caps quicker. So as rates increase, they're more likely to hit the cap and have that circuit breaker loss that's not collectible. So over time, right now we're seeing it go the way we want to. As NAV grows, rates are going down. We'll maintain over the next 5 years to see exactly where that goes, if it stays flat or if you're able to actually, continue to decrease the tax rate. So at the top of page 8, we have a summary of what your ending fund balances look like. Now, this is not everything. This doesn't include your landfill fund. These are your property tax funds, general, reassessment, health, ambulance, and then we have your highway funds, highway, local road and street, and your statewide 911 fund. So all of the charts that you'll see throughout the rest of the presentation follow this same guideline. There's a red dotted line at the bottom that indicates a minimum cash reserve of 15% guideline, ideally. The green bar at the top is a 50% cash reserve. The blue then indicates your current and or anticipated future ending balances. So currently is a combination of all of those funds that I just mentioned through 2029. That blue bar is right now currently above the 50% operating balance. So that's to say if it's in the middle, that's still fine. We don't want the blue to drop below the red, ideally. When we talk about operating balance, that calculation is your ending fund balance at the end of the year, like your ending 24 balance, divided by your operating expenses for that fund for 24. So if we say you have a 25% operating balance, that means you have enough cash reserves to function for a quarter of the year, for 3 months, without additional revenues. Ideally, 50% would be a 6-month operating. Now, because of your property tax funds, since you only get your major revenues twice a year, your property tax revenues twice a year, that's why we focus on that ending balance. Because if something were to happen to interrupt that distribution like we thought it was going to be in 2020 because of COVID, we thought people weren't going to pay their property tax bills and money wasn't going to come in. Having cash reserves available makes it so that you could get through times like that if necessary. Now, keeping much more than 50 to 75% long-term may not be healthy because you may be not funding projects that need to be funded. You may not be doing maintenance that needs to be taken care of or covered. Or you may be, maybe you're holding funds to plan for a large project. That's always, that's okay too. But if you have the need and have the availability in funds, you can consider those one-time projects. It's just, we don't like to see continuing year after year budgets increasing and continuing use of those reserves, so that over time it's just going down without new sources of funding coming back in to help, buoy it back up above that 25%. At the top of page 9, we have just a couple other things that changed recently in legislation that I would bring up. There were some changes made to road funding formulas. So currently for your motor vehicle highway tax, you have to put 50% in your restricted highway fund, which is for construction, reconstruction, and preservation of road surface. And then the other 50% can go into your motor vehicle highway unrestricted fund, which is where you can pay for regular hourly employees that aren't specifically attached to projects. You can pay for road salt, you can pay for signs, you can pay for all of those non-road preservation type functions. Starting next year on July 1st of 26, if your county has PACER pavement ratings of over 6, you can shift that distribution. You can choose to put 60% in your unrestricted fund, so you have more available to pay for individual hourly employee functions, and 40% in the restricted fund. So we've seen some counties get kind of lopsided. They have too much of the hourly and not enough of the contract. And so they're building larger reserves in the paving type funds, but they're not able to support hourly employees specifically for motor vehicle highway. So I think that's why some of that legislation was changed. There's also been changes made to funding and funding requirements for the Community Crossings Grant program. There's a change in match amount for counties under 50,000. The match amount has gone from 25 down to 20. They've also divided up the bucket of funds differently. So there's one bucket that everybody is eligible for. There's a second distribution, which they're terming a road miles distribution, which a county or municipality would have to have a wheel tax in place to be eligible for. So you don't currently have wheel tax, I don't believe. So if you chose to put one in place at the maximum rates available, you have to do the wheel and surtax. It would be revenue of about $920,000 for the county. If the county enacts a wheel tax, it's shared with municipalities also. Municipalities have to be over a population of 5,000 to do their own. So for any unit in the county, it would be up to you to adopt it if you so chose. I believe the minimum rates were around $163,000 in revenue for you. So that depends. You have to weigh out the benefits of having the potential to get additional road miles funding from community crossings against enacting a tax for something like the motor vehicle highway or the surtax of wheel tax in your county. So jump in some of our comments about the funds coming up that we'll look at for your county health fund. I'm sure you're aware that over the past 2 years, we've had Health First Indiana funding in place. For 2025, you're expecting to receive $300,000 for that. During this year's legislative session, funding for that program was cut drastically by about 70%. So in 26, the expected revenues are $88,790. I've heard some counties say that they'll just, if they're not going to get enough funding, they're just going to discontinue the programs that were put in place. However, if as a county you choose to continue some of those programs, just realize you may have to move expenses back to your standard county health fund, to your 1159. So because of these decreased revenues, and there's no guarantee that they'll be funded at all after 27, the biennial budget put funding in for Health First Indiana for 2 years. After 27, it's not guaranteed. And it's been, like I said, cut up to about 70%. So right now, and we didn't show, future shifts of property tax away from your health fund or anything. We left some balances there because if you do have to make the decision in say 28 or 29 to move things back, there could potentially be reserves there to help with that. But that's obviously a future decision for the county, and we're not making that decision for you. We're just leaving funds there if you choose to do that. From your ambulance fund, looking at those budgets, they appear to continue using some of the cash reserves in that ambulance fund. So in the future, the decision may have to be made to shift more property tax revenue to ambulance. I will step back. One thing that I said about the EMS and fire lit tax, it's not clear in legislation whether the county can take a share of that to pay for their ambulance fund and EMS contracts. So we're expecting more guidance on the exact operation of these other lit taxes over the next couple of years. I think everybody was so hit with the property tax that that's what they're addressing first because they have a couple of years leeway to figure out the lit. So within the next 2 years, we expect to know more about that. So there could be potentially, if you chose the 0.4% EMS fire, the county could keep a portion to help supplement your ambulance. But that's not a known quantity right now for sure. The other item is your statewide 911 fund. That one, I think I've told you many times, we're not seeing those revenues increasing over time. That's based upon a tax on individual phone bills. So that's something over time, we're continuing to see some downward trending in the balance for that fund. You may have to consider shifting expenses to your general fund or someplace else to help cover some of those. I know you use landfill to do some of it now. But after 2027, it appears that that might be a bit of a concern.
Are they doing away with the 911?
They're not doing away with it. It's just that revenues aren't increasing, but your budgets are. So
Okay, so it's reached its peak in growth.
pretty much, yeah, it's more, we're seeing them mostly stagnate, the revenues are remaining fairly flat.
Okay, that revenue source is a tax on
It's
landlines.
tax on landline phone.
Oh, well, I was thinking it was phones, including cellular, but if it's only landline, then
I believe it's
understand.
landline, and
Only landline. I
there's
think.
some sort of a fee that's on cell phones that's related to supporting 911 service,
That's what
but I'm
I-
not exactly sure how the distribution works for that.
Doesn't seem to generate.
It
much
doesn't generate
money
new
back.
revenue. Maybe the 911 state governing board is choosing to direct those funds someplace else and leaving these, fairly flat, but for the most part, they're staying flat. So as budgets increase, you may have to shift expenses someplace else from there. Didn't have a comment here on your landfill fund. Based upon your 25 budgets and additional appropriations, there could potentially be a funding shortfall this year, depending upon, because you're taking your landfill receipts from the previous year, then putting it in your landfill fee fund, and that's what you're making your capital expenses and supporting your other county departments, which I know that's always been the plan, is to not increase taxes any more than you have to, because you could use your landfill fees for that. But when we get to the landfill cash schedule, you'll see how there's a potential shortfall this year, and future budgets may limit what you can do to support highway, sheriff, ambulance, emergency services, and data processing, along with the other departments that you are currently. We always mention that when you're creating budgets, keep an eye on what the revenue estimates are for those budgets, for those funds, and create budgets that are nearly equivalent or as close to possible as your receipts. So here we've just given you a summary table, if you want to see it in one place, what your receipts look like in the coming year and then estimated for future years. As you're, looking at the budget, like if there's, it's not to say you have to create all budgets that are exactly balanced. It's understood that if you have a one-time capital project, those have room in budgets that can be out of balance. But if you're creating operational function budgets that each year are growing and using those cash reserves, eventually those cash reserves will be exhausted. So if you can keep budgets as close as possible to the receipts, that's the ideal guideline for your budgets. If you prepared capital plans for the county, that can always be helpful, just a general comment. Going forward, to sort of know what's coming up when, whether it's for roads or for building maintenance, you just have it written down in one place that everybody can see it, review it regularly, keep it up to date. It can help greatly with budgeting going forward. The next few pages, 3 pages actually, cover the assumptions that we've made for this report. First of which I mentioned was the 4% growth in levy. For this year, we've assumed that going forward as well, even though it hasn't been currently capped. We expect it to start to shift back down at some point. It's a 6-year average of non-farm income that determines what the max levy growth quotient is each year. So there was a fairly high number in 2021 that has kept the rate up currently. For example, I think this year it would have been 5.6% for 26 had it not been capped at 4%. So as 2021 falls out of the calculation, it's going to start shifting back down to that 4% area most likely. So that's why we're anticipating 4% going forward. For any place you see a tax rate for 2025 and forward, we're doing that based upon the 2025 net assessed value. We've left that flat line for 26, 7, and 8, but that will come, as we get 26, then we can update for 26. The next page just shows the assumptions that we made when allocating your levy. As council, every year you have the ability to determine how you choose to allocate your levy. It doesn't have to be the same year to year. It doesn't have to always be the same percentage to general. You can shift back and forth between reassessment and health. You can give more to ambulance if need be. Cumulative bridge is the only one that is somewhat limited because you have a max rate applied to that. It's within your cap of your max levy, but you have a rate to that currently. So unless you chose to reestablish that, you would not be able to take more than the previous year's rate for that circuit, the Cume Bridge. Then below, we were showing what your historical circuit breaker loss has been, and then this is just the basic circuit breaker loss. Those other portions we're estimating for LSA are greater than this, and they're indicated further back in the report, but this is just your base circuit breaker estimates. Then the next page is how we're estimating the revenues. Any fund that receives property tax also receives supplemental motor vehicle taxes of auto excise and commercial vehicle excise. So we're showing those we're not seeing great increases because just because you have more net assessed value or more levy doesn't mean that there's more people going and putting plates on their vehicles. So we just look at that amount sort of flatline currently based on 24 actual. And then we're still just applying those amounts to each fund going forward. So that's why you're seeing the percent drop. If your levy goes up, it's a slightly smaller percent. Not to say that there couldn't be more in the future, just the kind of the trend that we've seen. Most of your other revenues, your local services, we've looked at a 2 to 3 year average and considered that for 25 and then zero growth in those going forward. In general, your local revenues tend to stay fairly flat. Motor vehicle, highway, and local road and street gas taxes are also staying fairly flat right now. Maybe some small increases, $20,000 to $30,000 a year, but not large gains in any of those. So in most cases, we've either, like I said, done a 2 to 3 year average, seen those items stay fairly flat. Motor vehicle, highway, and local road street, we have looked at what you brought in this year relative to last year. Again, like I said, small increases. For your, I think I mentioned previously, for that new county services lit, the number we've given you is based upon current AGI, the 2025 AGI. So that again could increase in the future. And then your budgets, we've assumed about a 3% increase. We don't have the budgets yet for the 26 from your auditor. So when we get those from her, we can supplement this and provide you some new budget to receipt sort of comparison so you can see what may need to be cut or where you may need to make some shifts. So jumping onto page 14 is your general fund. I'll just go over some of the commonalities that you'll see sort of in each of these schedules. The general fund's the only one that spans 2 pages. But so if it's a property tax fund, towards the top, we've highlighted the estimated excess shortfall from Senate Bill 1. That's yellow line, those yellow numbers into 25 or 26, I'm sorry, through 29. So of that 425,000 that I mentioned, because of your general fund gets most of your property tax, about 324,000 of that additional loss would be allocated here. So whereas in 25, your net property tax is around 6.163 million. In 26, we would expect it to be about 6.118. So it's the net effect there with some increase in levy and then some additional circuit breaker. The net effect there is still a decrease potentially in those property tax revenues for this year, although it's not huge. We are estimating lit for 26 and 27 at your amount for 25. We don't have the report yet from the Department of Revenue. It should be out any day now. It's always out by August 15th. So for your 26 revenues, we'll have that. We can update that as well, give you a better number there. And then I've highlighted where the county services lit comes into play in 28 and 29. So we estimated an amount that brought you fairly close to your current revenues, but at the time, you'll need to actually evaluate that, see where the AGI is and what percentage you need to put in place. So for 2020 and down in the expenses, the next section then is your expenses. So then you have a blue bar right above that that shows your total operating receipts. Total operating expenses for everything in 25 is your approved budget, plus any additional appropriations you've made and any encumbrances. And then budgets going forward, 26 through 29, assume that 3% growth in personal services, supplies, other services and charges, and then 0% growth in capital outlays. So in this case, then at bottom, you have a net operating receipts line. So we still expect in 25 that you will have more in revenue than you will in expenses. If you have more additional appropriations, that could change. Then about 2027, the second year of that impact from the Senate Enrolled Act 1, we start to see some negative numbers. That means you're using cash reserves instead of maintaining those balances. The top of the next page is just those smaller, less frequent, what we would call non-operating receipts and disbursements. We don't anticipate those going forward because those are one-offs. You don't always sell a lawnmower every year. You don't always have a transfer in, those kind of, so we don't estimate those going forward, but you can see what they've been historically. And so then that change in fund balance just takes into consideration everything, operating and non-operating, till we get to the bottom blue line, which is an ending cash balance. And then down below that, we show tax rate and then also that operating balance. So we're estimating county's operating balance this year at 108%. Going down to about 93% then in 2029. Again, we don't know exactly what's coming between now and 2029. So you've got some reserves to start and hopefully help get through some of the things that may be coming. And then the next schedule is the individual graph for your general fund. As I mentioned before, it's got the green bar, the 50% recommended max cash reserve, and then the red bar at the bottom. As you mentioned before, this is, you largely have these cash reserves because you do supplement expenses from your landfill fund. If you didn't have your landfill, you'd have a very different looking picture here. The next one is your reassessment fund. So this one is a property tax fund, so a small amount of that additional circuit breaker loss comes here as well. You still have, this is not a large revenue fund specifically for the assessor's office and their functions. So you're still maintaining balances here. If you chose, you could shift some property tax away from here for a year, put it towards general, towards ambulance. That's up to you, because you do have balances there that you could fund it for a year. You can see where at the current level of tax levy, that blue line just kind of keeps going up there on that one. So the budget's has not increased there like it has in some of the other funds. Page 19 and 20 is the information for your health fund. And so this one, we've also left some, you didn't necessarily recommend moving anything out because of the future of the Health First Indiana programs. And if something may have to come back in here. Then the page 21 to 22 is your ambulance fund. If you look down at row 31 and the green bar, that's where I was talking about budgets currently are continuing to use those cash reserves. Why at some point we actually made, I think, some shifts to keep it here where it was supposed to be, or above the 15%. It's a little bit more than that. But if you had another, where you needed to use $215,000 worth of reserves a couple more years, it's not going to be there. So it's just pointing that out for future reference. And then next here is your statewide 911 fund. This one, we did indicate some budget cuts on page 11. And that's just to keep you at a 15% balance based upon operating balance based upon the revenues estimated for this fund. So this one is one that you'd need to be potentially showing even by 27, you would have to maybe cut that budget or shift some expenses elsewhere to keep this one in a positive long-term balance. Then the next one is the unrestricted portion of your highway fund. You've actually got decent balances here, but again, because I know you're supplementing highway services from your landfill. This, like I said, is the one that can be used for general highway activities. It doesn't have to be used specifically for construction and paving. The next one is your local road and street. This is purely a capital projects fund. You can't pay for individuals from this fund, so this one you kind of just keep where what you have available. You can use this one for paving. Currently, your budgets are not exceeding the receipts for this one, so you're kind of growing the balance here at local road and street. The next section is more capital-based project funds. So the first one is the highway restricted. You have balances here as well, again, for the same reason that you did in the regular highway fund. We're just showing you your riverboat fund on page 31. That one's, just for your information. We don't normally recommend you regularly budget from your riverboat fund, or I'm sorry, your riverboat, this is not rainy day, this is riverboat. This one you do have by the end of 2029, about $1 million potentially in that one, if you don't do anything with it before then. So this one can be for any capital project that you need across the county, whether it's IT, whether it's buildings, whether it's vehicles, however, whatever you need it for, you would have that some capital expenditure there. These are revenues that aren't going to increase either. You can see they're flat, pretty much flatlined. Since you don't have a riverboat or a casino, you get a small portion of the part that's been earmarked to divvy up between the rest of the state, so. The next is your landfill fund schedule. And you look at 2025, the expenses from the budget plus what has been approved for additional appropriations. That's where we're showing this potential $215,000 shortfall this year in revenue. So, and that's to say, we always think you're gonna spend the whole, we assume you'll spend the whole budget you've approved. We assume you'll spend every additional appropriation. So if some of those things shift, it may not be quite this bad. But that's just what we're seeing potentially. And then going forward, obviously we don't know what additional appropriations will be yet, but there does appear that there may be some shortfall. Your receipts this year seem a little bit behind the past couple of years. So that's why we decreased that estimate from 7.6 to 6.7. We annualized what you've brought in so far this year and came out to that 6.7 number. So I kind of look back over the past couple of years. Sometimes it picks up the second half of the year, sometimes it doesn't. So that is sort of a wait and see between now and the end of the year is what you actually have for next year.
So on the expenditures in 25, that is included 9 million and the 5 million for GT Sports.
Is that hasn't been approved, has it? The GT,
Yeah,
these are approved additionals.
Okay, they're putting it in the budget here.
we approved the additional for that, for
Then
GT Sports.
Then it's not, because if she didn't, she gave us the approved additional appropriations. Is it in the budget for this year or the budget for next year?
It was an approved additional.
don't
Am I
think
correct?
it's approved.
I don't know.
I have the sewer
Right.
project. Yeah, that's part of the
Yeah,
12.4.
yeah, 30. That's what it-
That's $5 million. We better figure out if it's in here or not.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I don't believe it is, because if this number is 12.49. And I know that there's 9 something for the sewer, there can't be 5 additional. There's other smaller projects that make up the rest of this 12.4.
Well, then it would have been in the budget if it was. In my mind.
Because your budget numbers aren't really high enough to take a lump of 5 million either.
I feel like it wasn't included in either one,
Mhm.
but
Cause I knew that there was talk about it when I wasn't given it as an additional, approved additional, I didn't include it.
do approve the additional, but it has not been expected
Mhm.
or put in a budget.
I thought that, yes, I was here last year, but you approved it last year, didn't you?
Was that in last year's numbers?
It was in last year's numbers, but because there's that 7 million is, I don't have it in here. Because we haven't had a signed contract or anything, so we have not put the 5, but we haven't done the additional for 5 million. It was in last year's budget, but we have not put it back in this year's budget.
So we approved an additional in 24 and then did not put that in our 25 budget for.
Because we thought we were gonna spend it last year, and we didn't.
But what I'm getting at is, we've made a commitment that we thought that we're gonna follow through, but
Correct.
of $5 million is not reflected in there anywhere. It appears
You're
there.
correct.
So it's not part of that 8 million that was spent in 2024. Because this is gonna be what was spent, okay. And then, no, it's not in the 12.4, because,
I mean, we didn't spend it in 24. It was put in 24.
mhm.
But it
But
would
we
have been,
didn't
So
spend it.
nothing that was spent in this 8.8 million.
it would have been cash carried over in 25.
So it's reflected in your end balance at the bottom of the year, but it's not included in the
But
expense
it needs
numbers
to
right
be
here.
included in a future expense if we're gonna.
So, I mean, at that point, you're back to pretty much the numbers that I showed you when I was here in March, because that would be an additional 5 million negative.
You're exactly right. That's what I was expecting to see,
Yeah.
and when I did, that's what I asked.
Yeah,
Yes, you're correct.
so. Because since I didn't get it as an approved additional, I didn't know if where that project was, so.
Join the call.
So we need to. So that bottom,
We
that
need
blue
to-
number.
We
is a
need to
lot bigger
keep
than-
that conversation open.
Okay. Always include the $5 million.
It's a big difference from them.
Oh,
I'm looking at this and thinking, man, we're in a lot better shape than I thought we were.
Well-
This is not right.
I mean, yeah, I don't know where it's gonna come from because it's
Yeah, I don't either.
no fun, no place, no space there.
17.42.
What's that, Bob? Go ahead.
No, just in round numbers, when I was looking at it, the cash balance was 17 million, and I know in one meeting we gave away 22 million.
Yeah, yeah,
Which you 5 million.
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That was just something good. Hey, why there's a break here real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so the Pacer rating better than 6.
Uh-huh. And I looked up yours last year, it was like 6.9.
6 point.
6.79, so something like that.
So instead of 50%, you can change that to 40%. Is that every single year you have to certify your Pacer rating?
Yeah, they're gonna look at the pacer rating from the previous year, and it starts midway through the year next year that you.
And then just my general knowledge on the circuit breaker
Uh-huh.
on the graph went to 29. Do you just stop at 29? Is that a state requirement? That county by county? Who sets the levies? When was that adopted?
Circuit breakers,
Circuit breaker, yes.
circuit breaker went into place in 2012.
Okay.
So every year since then, there have been these tax caps in place on a per property type basis. So if you're a one
Statewide or county?
statewide,
Statewide.
it's every county in the state's under the same caps. Yeah. Yep, it's countywide.
Also, our break, maybe just not seeing it, you've got personal property taxes. I don't see them in here anywhere.
Personal property tax is part of property tax, so. Business personal property, so if you look back on the general fund, when you pay. Personal property tax, it's distributed as part of that line 2 number, property tax. So, and there's changes,
These figures, personal, real property.
they're all, yeah, I'm sorry, they're all combined.
To base that out, I think that number's being way lower. That's, I'm understanding correct. We break it first property taxes is applied.
I think 2.7 to 2.8 million. But as they start to phase it out, I mean. I think.
I mean, it's part of the reductions that I'm talking about.
Now, we'll make sure that.
Yeah,
It's understanding. That's a lot of money.
it is. And it's not gonna completely eliminate it, but it's gonna take a lot of it out. So as I talk about, because personal property and business personal property are part of the county's net assessed value, the value of those items. So as I'm talking about that net assessed value coming down, so it's not just on real, it is on personal property as well. It's part of all of it. Yeah, that's again, the legislative services agencies with the numbers they've given us, we're trying to put our own model. We're working on our own model, I should say. We're not trying, we're putting it together. It's a significant undertaking. It takes a lot of time. So we'll at some point be able to give you hopefully more concrete estimates of this loss amount. But we feel that with what the LSA has done, that these would, like I said, be worst case scenario numbers.
Make sure I understood.
Yeah, sorry about that. And didn't make that part clear. Okay, I guess we just left off with landfill. The next one we have is your Cume Bridge Fund. Again, you've got some reserves here. This one also capital project based, so you to maintain the county's bridges. This is the one that I mentioned was rate based. So here, when you look across line 33 where it says tax rate, we're showing the same tax rate each year. We just make sure that that gets requested at the appropriate rate every year so that you don't lose anything. Then there, next is the snapshot of the rainy day fund. I got ahead of myself earlier. Again, we don't recommend you routinely budget from that one, but it's there if you needed some emergency cash. The next couple pages are explanations of what individual funds can be used for. Some of them, like your county, is general purpose. So if you need to make up for any other county department, you can do that from your general fund. Whereas if you keep large balances in your health or reassessment fund, there's not statutory authority to just routinely transfer money back and forth. So that's why we encourage you, if anything, keep your property tax towards your general fund, as long as you're sufficiently funding your other functions, because once you put it there, you can't take it out and use it for something else. So you can't use health department to pay for reassessment, or you can't use bridge money to pay for in general. So that's how we keep those, kind of keep them tight, close to their needs.
Susan, we have a cume cap that we've got a 0 rate. I believe, right now.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not part of the levy.
No, cume cap is the only thing that
It's a
you would have
local-
that's outside of the levy. So if you chose to reestablish your cume cap fund, it can be set back up to a max rate of 3.33 cents, 0.0333. So that one is outside that, whereas, if you shift your cume bridge, you're just pulling levy away from your general or your health. Cume cap is outside of that max levy, so it is specifically for capital functions and capital projects. But you could, if you chose, every year, you have the opportunity between January 1st and May 31st to reestablish that fund for the following year. So you could put that back in place if you so chose. We normally put that in here, and I did it for you guys. I'm not sure if because people
Well, we-
really shut yours
We
down.
moved that down to 0 a few years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
It'd be time to reconsider getting that.
Do you want me to send Tammy what the revenue would look like potentially for
I
that?
think we should take a look at that, but it's
Sure.
specific to
I don't
capital
think we were
projects for
collecting
big
half a
account.
cent when we had,
What's that?
last time we weren't even collecting a half a cent under.
No, yeah, it was a really, really low rate, but look at it.
Yeah,
Numbers
we can
going
give you some
forward, maybe
alternatives, like
something.
based upon different rates, what that might look like.
And then on that, ours is specific for, that's a local, goal, correct? I mean.
Mhm.
I think ours ordinance or whatever says we can only spend it on courthouse, jail, and
Courthouse jail.
I thought there was one other thing, too. I thought there was. but- So can that be amended to make that into like our ambulance buildings, or is that?
For their related to CCD fund, but they haven't reflected on it. for like 4 years.
I guess, do they get ready, but.
I think you may have to declare it. I can check into that too. You may need to declare your current one dormant and establish a whole new one. Which there's a slightly different process for that. I'll look into that for sure, because if you have an existing ordinance, can you reestablish and revise that ordinance? I'm not sure. That doesn't
We
happen
have
often.
need at jail and courthouse, so
Yeah.
we do have a need
Yeah,
that would
either
free
way.
up money that we're spending.
But if you want to maybe expand the use of it, that would probably be the time before you.
While it's at 0 to.
Yeah, like if you can before the end of the year, maybe you.
Yeah, you guys can get
Ordinance
us
then
some
establish.
information on that, so we can.
The next page, page 40, shows where you have been budgeted to actual expenditures for the past 3 years. In general, if the fund is one of your main operating funds, like your general fund, like your maybe statewide 911 fund, your health, your ambulance, those larger funds, if you're spending somewhere between, say, 90% and 110% of the budgets, that's usually a guideline to indicate that the budgets are in line with what you need. If you are routinely spending over 110%, meaning maybe the budget wasn't well planned, and granted, emergencies can come up, you may need last minute things that you didn't know about during budget time. But trying to keep those budgets as close as possible, your expenses as close as possible to budgets is really ideal. So for the most part, some of the capital projects funds, that's not gonna happen because the weather doesn't cooperate, you can't finish a fund, and so you don't have to pay for it or project it, or you can't get a contractor available, or plans change. So a number of different things can happen, but this is just to give you a general idea. When those expenses are pretty close to 100% of the budget, that means it's an efficient budget that's including what it needs to include.
I think it's worth saying right here too. One of the reasons we've kept these kind of pretty consistent is because we adjust with landfill
Landfill, yeah.
dollars to vendors come out, and that may not be as easy an option in the future as we go forward, as it has been. So
Right.
I think those are a little distorted numbers we're looking at here.
Because when you look, landfill, something like, you budget 92%. And spent 92% of it in 22, you spent 115 of what you budgeted in 23, and then 155% of what you budgeted.
And this next year is
24.
gonna look
Next year's gonna be-
really.
It's a lot worse. So yeah, so since landfill's fund's going crazy, that's why everything else looks calm. Yeah. Then the next page is just a summary schedule. This is information that you saw on other pages, the ending balances, but if you wanted to look at one place, actual ending balances for your funds and anticipated going forward, that's there. The next page lists your two debts that are currently paid out of your landfill fund. And then I just included for your information, some comparative schedules of few, particularly counties around you. The first one is your lit rate compared to Porter Lake, Benton, White, and Jasper County's lit rate. And I believe we talked before, you always ask what Jasper does with their lit, well, that they have pretty much the highest rate they can have. But so they're well below them and sort of less than halfway through that one. The next one shows your net assessed value. So again, in this case, Newton being the green bar, farthest there to the left, you're the smallest of those comparative counties. We would expect Lake to be huge like that. And it's just a much larger, more larger county. Then the next page is your property tax rates and where you are relative to others. And again, it's because you have lower net assessed value, you have lower area. Over time, I think I may have mentioned this before, your max levy was set back in the early 70s. That maximum levy amount was set in the 70s. Over times, things have changed. People have left, maybe businesses have left, your net assessed value makeup has changed. So at one point, you may have had a lower tax rate, but over time, you're spreading your net assessed value has maybe contracted a little bit, so that's pushed your rate up. Jasper, they've got a broader base to spread their levy out over, and granted, their levy amount is different too. They're supplementing their current property tax too with local income tax, which you're not necessarily doing that. So that's where that rate comes in differently. And then the very last page, it's maybe a little hard to figure out what I'm doing, what we do with this one. But this just shows of the levy that you're bringing in. The levies are the amounts across the bottom. So of all these counties, Benton has the smallest amount of max levy. Lake has the largest. So they're about $8 million in net levy. So per capita, per person in the county, how much of that levy is per person? So that's on the red bar indicates that per person levy. Of course, Lake County is more populous. Just in general, they're more. So they're going to be able to spread it out over more people. But that just gives you an idea, some relation to the counties around you where you are, things like local income tax and property tax. And sometimes these are just good to know. They don't necessarily mean you can do anything different because we've talked about you can't get yourself more levy unless you put your CCD fund in place. That's one small thing you could do. Over time, it's just gonna be dependent upon your net assessed value, your levy and where your tax rates come out and what circuit breaker does to you for most of them. Since the smaller revenues stay pretty stagnant, they don't go up and down a lot. And what changes you decide to make or what would implement with lit would be the only other possible change you could make, but that would be increasing that lit rate. So like I said, as we get 26 budgets, we'll get that updated. As we get more information on 26 lit, we'll get that information updated at some point. We'll give you, I don't know if we'll ever get to a final version of this because of everything going on legislatively, but we'll get you some sort of, at least including your 27 budgets, what it looks like. And then we'll get you information as you're going through budget workshops to give you a determination of what may need to be cut. Any other questions or comments?
So I want to thank you, first of all, very, very thorough, excellent snapshot.
Good.
So I'm gonna take advantage of your time here real quick. As you look at this overall assessment, what's your biggest concern? I know you
Landfill.
had to have thought about this. Your biggest concern for our county is,
The biggest support is your landfill. Well, you've used landfill for so long to support general and other operations. If that landfill money is not there, there's not a lot of options otherwise. It's much more restrictive. You've been able to go for a number of years using that, but you've had a lot more demands on it lately. You've made decisions to, aid economic development in the county, to aid growth, to, improve, the individuals' lives by extending sewer service, things like that. Those are hard decisions to have to make, knowing that, and that's pulling out money that you could potentially use to fund other services in the future.
And then, I'm a do-out guy, like, what's my homework, right? So with the legislative changes, you said townships are not gonna get certified shares, a lot of our fire departments within the townships, right? The town funding now is gonna be dependent on decisions that we make here. Is there a checklist? Like what's most important? I mean, there's a lot of decisions being made in the very near future that's gonna affect everybody in the county.
Right, and I think one of the main things to take away from what the legislature is trying to do is that when they're pushing more decision-making to the local level. To make those decisions, you need to talk to your other units in the county. Making these decisions in a vacuum isn't gonna benefit anybody. So if the townships don't come to you and the libraries don't come to you, you will unfortunately need to be the ones to reach out to them. And I don't know what their associations are telling them to do. I don't know what stance they're telling them to take, but I don't think you need to wait until 2027 to start talking about this. They need to, get ahead of it and understand that they may not get the same amount that they get currently because of these new restrictions. So talking to them, figuring out what makes sense. Does it make sense to do the 410 CMS? Does it make sense to do just that, or do you need to do the township part? What's really gonna keep because you don't want to sacrifice fire service, ideally, public safety and fire to, general things, and fire is generally the main purpose of townships in most cases.
Are townships still gonna have their fire tax rate?
Yeah, they'll still have their fair tax levies. Yeah.
Most of those budgets, those fire budgets in the townships are supported by their tax rate. Their lit is
As long as they are,
an option that township has to use that way.
right, they're supposed to be supported by their fire. Some of them have to step outside and use their lit, and I wasn't sure exactly what the situation here was in Newton County.
I'm not sure how the municipal structure, but the township structure.
We pay fire contracts, right? Pay
There's
fire
A contract, but how do you support that? How does the town support that? contract?
So it's a pass-through, it's
On a
so like in
fire
our house,
rate?
it's $4 a month. It
But
goes-
is it-
Everyone says it's on utility bill, but it's a pass-through from the town to the county.
But is there a fire rate in your tax? There's,
No.
where the
It's
town,
absolute pass.
where the township actually have a fire rate.
They have, yeah, and some of them have a cume fire fund, which they can accrue for buildings and trucks. But most of them, I kind of took a quick look through their 24 actuals, and they were spending exactly what they were bringing in. And I don't know, based upon their general fund, if they were also using their supplemental shares for part of that, because I don't know what the end contract amounts are.
You would know, so.
We can't survive on what we get now.
But I'll be surprised if they're using, if the township's using certified shares to support your fire.
So,
That she's using that other places. She's only using the rates, I guess what I'm saying, we need to communicate, we really do, but I think we need to find out how there's.
Yeah,
Their
that's
rates.
exactly it. You need to find out how each of them are supporting,
Because I'll be surprised.
because,
Surprised if they're.
their fire fund and their cume fire fund are also gonna see increased circuit breaker losses. So their nets coming in each year are gonna be less. The library nets are gonna be less. So, yeah, they're gonna have to do some work and figure out what this looks like for them and figure out how much if they are having to supplement with certified shares, how much of it is going to township assistance, how much of it's going to parks or general operating. So there's gonna be some work that they're gonna have to do to justify what they're asking you for.
I think the trustees, like our trustee went to Indianapolis.
Mhm.
Convention or conference, whatever you call it. Was that talked about, do you think?
I know that it's on the topics for their fall conference,
Okay.
For responses, and I've talked to a lot of other township people that said that we've gotten this, memo from
There's
this.
a lot coming, and I don't
Yeah.
know, are they aware?
I feel like they're very aware if they're reading what the ITA is sending them and because the ITA they had townships go down and testify during the legislative session too, to try to point out what was happening. So I feel like the ITA is putting information out. And I believe it, like I said, I've seen the basic agenda, and I think it's a topic this year of what to do and how to, you know, what the steps are gonna be. But that, like I said, we're still waiting on some guidance exactly how it's gonna work.
I just, our trustee, we work really close with our trustee,
Uh-huh.
like our trustee,
Uh-huh.
she's on top of things, but she's never mentioned any of this.
Oh,
That's why I was asked, I'm gonna ask.
I hope she has, because I feel like they
She
put different
kinda did
information
the other
out.
day when I was up there and Niemeyer was there, she talked about, yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think she's aware, but I don't know if any of them fully comprehend.
Right, that's, I guess.
Exactly what,
So
what is gonna
Well,
happen.
the other part of that is, in all 10 townships, they don't run them the same. And their budgets are gonna be
Yeah.
different. So what is their certified shares going towards? And I
Yeah,
bet we're gonna find out a lot of fire protection.
And I bet, I would be on the complete opposite side of that statement.
And you think what?
I think they're not using their certified shares, they're using their fire rates, not their certified shares. But I don't know, it'll be
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
to see.
see how,
But
see how
they
it's
don't
in
have-
county.
In Beaver Township, you might be right.
I think
Right.
most of them, because
Okay.
So I know. when
We'll
we
find out.
we'll find out, yeah, I don't know.
When we disperse all the money to them every month, it goes in their county general.
Which it has to.
Correct.
I think 3 years ago,
That's why.
the state board changed that.
Fire, because it goes in
They used to put it
their
part,
county
someone would put it
general.
part when they got in general, part fire.
They have.
But now they got told they have to put it all in general and transfer the expenses from fire to general.
Because it has to go with general.
Yeah,
It has
yeah,
to.
Yes.
Then it's just.
Yeah. Yeah, so they were,
But
which we thought was crazy because it's taking away the transparency.
it's a huge decision on our part, right?
I guess, hey, Scott, I guess my question is at some point with all this going on, should we have like a workshop with all the trustees and get everybody in the room and make sure everybody's on the same page and,
I was
It's a
thinking that
wonderful idea.
myself,
you know, because
I don't know
everybody's
when
at
that
different
point
levels.
is, but it's sooner
All have
rather than
different
later,
thoughts.
but yet. What do you expect is,
Yeah, 'cause when this happens, Beaver, Lake and Lincoln will lose out the most. They're anywhere from 72,000 to 85,000 that they will not get for the whole year.
on their certified shares.
And the libraries, the amount of the 10 we dispersed 355,000 to, or the libraries, we dispersed 398,000, so they're gonna be on short. For the year. Oh, sir.
So then to Scott's point, so that, if you put yourself in their position. Get your levy, you're getting your landfill tipping, right? Maybe
That's
they are
coming
using
down.
landfill tipping towards fire now, so that they can use their general fund for what they want. I mean, every time I don't know.
If they're all-
Susan, do you have anything that? We mix a lot, obviously with landfill and then everything else. Do you have anything that says, okay, landfill closes tomorrow and all that goes away? And all of our operating stuff that we're paying out of landfill, if we have to put that into actual funds to pay it, what
No.
that looks like?
No, I don't, but that's
Can we
something.
create that?
Oh.
Nobody wants.
We don't wanna look at that.
Don't ask that question.
You're gonna be down in that bottom line, that's not 15%.
But,
Yeah.
and the problem with that is we can't replace it because we have a maximum levy.
Right,
I mean, all you're gonna have to do is have less money to spend.
right.
Our biggest what's killed us is on our projects, because we have slowly made sure we're putting everything back. I mean, highway, I think, is what's really left operating. We have a few others that we can start to move back to county general to offset.
We work on projects. Okay.
I mean, one of the big things is there wouldn't be any new equipment going for a long time. It would be if police cars go out there.
Right.
That's where we're spending a lot of landfill.
We like spending money on the sheriff's department stuff that won't be there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not gonna be there.
And
But better to know that now. than 10
Oh,
years
you're
from-
exactly
10
right.
years from now.
exactly.
I think we got 20 years. Yeah, in 20 years. it's-
Thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Then you
Turn
have
the
a
floor over to Brian.
They wanna take what he's getting up here.
I had to take a break. Record.
Brian, we're gonna get a cup of coffee. There. Just a few minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's.
It's part of that.
Well, since it mentioned. Sure. Also, I'm not sure.
Well, when they did that, I just think, right, they had. So there were options when you're not.
But those are big.
Right, so they.
Fortunately, I'm always going to look at this was a town. Yeah. The about the difference I just say.
Oh, the, like, interactive down there, or. They can.
Text.
Special.
Yeah.
Are willing to pay.
Yeah.
You travel everywhere I go. Yeah, shit, I paid everywhere else. Walk through the walk. Yeah. They want to, we'll say $96 room, $160.
Yeah.
So I'm going to walk in, well, I promise I'll pay there.
Yeah.
That's of course. Watch that number. That's what now. What majority of the state are.
Well, that's part of the.
You know, I don't think.
Well, I'm fine, I have a phone number. You want my cell phone number?
Oh. Oh,
Well, I already got your number.
You got my personal, but that's right, however you wanna call me. In case someone needs to get a hold of me, if you wanna give them my county number. Thanks. Okay, something good.
That's easier.
hang on.
Yeah. And what else I want to cover everything. Oh, I would think so. You take out those. That's all. And I say 16.
Okay, got it.
Awesome.
Is what it is. Right.
Most time that's what you call.
It's like.
That's what I was thinking is was. I think I'm talking, so I'm saying that.
Someone has.
And the truth is, everybody's.
Well, I mean. Some reasons. Here are the knowledge, just like you find out.
Thank you.
They try to generate first study for English with your personnel.
It's the hotels, that's just to get tickets, that's the best. And now you know why I think that. It's Beyonce concert. Of course, my big sign. It goes to the ready. So great.
There's no one, some holidays. That's what they. Only the, they go to that.
Listen, there's 5%.
Yeah, because it's only even to. 99% sure, I'm gonna be going to press road kind of change. I couldn't quite say charging them, no, no, it's.
It's just $1.
Well, first. Gene.
Rooms are.
That's one way to make money off.
I
told Sawyer. Check.
Military.
We're not.
Well, they need.
Maybe I saw some.
And it'll be like on the road.
We're traveling on that.
Oh, I'm going to Milwaukee.
For the cruise, so. Okay, well, I'll take back.
Yeah, we're just gonna end.
Okay, well, that's, Scott tells me I mumbled and everybody said, well, yeah, I don't,
Yeah.
that's how period two was snorting your parents' home. Not gonna be. The things that. I'm here.
It's like.
Right.
What do you have to say?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And now my grandma's stuff. They did.
I can't have it. And then everybody's.
Well, it's kind of hard to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, we say have to fix something. Tells me stuff. This is gonna end up going.
Yeah.
Actually, talk about it down.
I think this was their right field was kind of, yeah, kind of bad. But then it was what he was doing, I had to get it, yeah, makes it.
So whatever the project.
Clear, clear it out. But then, like, step right here, so we did that for in Arizona for like 4 years for your next. Thank you so much. That's it. So. Other things, everybody, but I, you know, go there, actually do it. Long time, yeah. By the time you get to it. Yeah, it's like not.
Right.
I probably make some extra.
But, you know. You know. And you got the trucks right there.
I guess it is. I mean, it doesn't look to me like.
They don't look the same as the market.
Yeah.
Yes, it's being.
I really.
I have talked about, they're just.
I did talk
They
to
did talk about maybe sort of.
Jasper County and Dwight, and they both said they have their 75%. So you'll have to go to the state. And that's permitted. You go higher than that, but then I read something that said they changed that. That we don't hire than center.
Really?
It's ready.
Yeah.
We will reconvene the special meeting of the council, the joint meeting of council and commissioners for purpose of gathering knowledge and information for this. Brian, welcome.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Brian Colt from Baker Tilly, been here many times in the past, it's been a while. So what we were asked to come talk about were a few different potential taxes and then maybe some ways to look at additional fees or taxes related to the new sports project. So the first tax. And we talked about this, I think it was in 2019, probably been a while, on innkeeper's tax. But just to inform and refresh people's memories of this, and welcome to the newer members that haven't heard this talk before. So the innkeeper's tax under Indiana statute, there's really two ways to enact the innkeeper's tax. One is through the uniform statute. And that's where it has very specific, and we'll talk in more detail here in a second, but it has specific guidelines, and these are the 7 categories that are included. You can have a rate up to 5%. It's what it sounds like. It's uniform as far as how it operates. The other way you can enact an innkeeper's tax is through specific enabling legislation. So it'd be specific to Newton County. It would be the Newton County innkeeper's tax. That gives you the flexibility of deciding what types of lodging facilities do we want to tax? What do you want that rate to be? Has a little bit more flexibility in what you can use the funds for. So that would be kind of the other way to look at it. The difference is the uniform process you can go through very quickly. That's just the very fast process. The other one, as it sounds, requires legislation, so you'd have to have some local representatives kind of carry that bill to the state and get it added into the code that covers all of the different innkeeper's taxes as well. You'll see a lot of people have gone that route and it's fairly successful. It's a matter of if you get local people involved, if they want to do it, it usually passes. If there's a lot of opposition to it for some reason, that's where you may run into trouble.
What's timeline on that one, average?
I mean, you would wanna, like, if you wanted to do it in the next session, you would wanna start having those conversations. Probably end of the year, early next year before session gets underway.
Okay.
You don't wanna decide partway through session, hey, let's do this. So you need to lay some of that groundwork. And typically, you know, the larger law firms of Indianapolis would help through that. They would help draft that language. They would help kind of carry that. And I didn't work with Post in the past on. I don't know if you're still looking at Post, but as legal counsel, then they could help with that and kind of shepherd that through that process.
But this is basically would be just for Newton County, or would it be for the entire state?
Newton County. So every county has their own specific tax that they would have. Are you talking about as far as the approval?
The legislation,
That's at the State House.
right, but would it be just for our county?
But you'd be getting the legislation just for a Newton County innkeeper's tax.
Yeah.
And the difference between uniform and specific is how the money can be spent, because uniform is for conventions, tourism, and industrial activities. Whereas specific enabling is for convention and visitor activities only.
It can be for that. It can also be for project specific. There's, some places where they've used it for specific, like capital projects or different funds. So you can set, you have a little bit of flexibility of if you did the Newton County version.
Hey, Brian,
So
back on that, page 2, under uniform, what's industrial activities?
That's what I was thinking.
well, it's a state of essentially.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's for sure.
Right. See if it defines what industrial activity is. Well, it says tourism industry, so maybe that should have been. So industrial really should be like the tourism industry, not like industrial buildings. But yeah, so it's related to promote the development and growth, the convention visitor and tourism industry.
Take out the for and change industrial to industry.
Yeah, I would change it to industry. And then on page 3, it just shows how almost 80 counties already have the innkeeper's tax in place in Indiana, so it is very widespread. 2/3 of those have done it through the uniform statute, about 1/3 have done it through the enabling legislation. So as you can see with the uniform tax, the rates in Indiana range from about 3.5% to 5%. Most are at 5% with uniform. And for those that went to get their own rate, that one does have a bigger variance. It's from 5 to 10%. But even those, a lot of those are in the 5-6% range. Marion County, not surprisingly, is the 10%. And there's a couple counties at 9%, 8% that I remember from looking at it. It's probably not gonna be, if you put it in place, it's not a huge generator because you don't have a lot of hotels in Newton County, so it's directly tied to that. I did look just to kind of give you an idea for like one room, let's say if the room's at $100, assuming it's 80% occupancy at a 5% rate, that's almost $1,500 a year that one would generate in taxes. So that just kind of gives you an idea if you just figured out how many hotel rooms there were or room nights that you would have, that's what you would get. So maybe 100 rooms, it's about $150,000 a year. At 80%, if you did 60% occupancy, it's about 110,000. So it does start to generate, funds. It's not gonna solve a hole in like landfill, that we're talking about, but it would start to provide some funds there that would then generate additional traffic in the county. And then on page 4, then the next question is, how does it get levied? Who does it get levied on? So under the uniform innkeeper's tax, levied on any person or business renting, furnishing, accommodations for a period of less than 30 days. So anything that's over a month would not fall under the statute. Anything under a month would fall under the statute. And these 7 categories are what are included under the uniform. Hotels, motels, boat motels, inns, college, university, memorial unions, and residence halls. The residence hall is if they're not like a student, obviously, but this is if they have something at the residence hall like during the summer, like a summer camp, or renting it out for some type of private use. And then tourist cabins also fall under that.
Does that include campgrounds?
So campgrounds,
Tourist, campgrounds have like yurts or tourist cabins per se.
Yeah.
Which are specific structures as
I
opposed
think
to.
when we looked at that in the past, that has fallen under it. Now what's interesting about that, and that could be one that we could get further clarification from the state on. There are some statutes for some of the specific other counties that did their innkeeper's tax that specifically cite campsites and that. So that may be an area, but when we looked at it before, what we were told 6 years ago was that really would fall under that
Would
category.
Cover campgrounds.
Yeah.
Should add the word campgrounds in here.
I mean, we could, this is just under the statute as far as how they kind of define the 7 categories.
Because the other thing in here says for periods of less than 30 days, but in campgrounds, in the county, we've got 4 campgrounds that I know of, mostly in the north end. There's permanent campers that are there 9 months out of the year or something like that. So would that disqualify their ability?
They would not be charged the innkeeper's tax.
And if you stayed in a hotel for 30 days or longer, like an extended stay, or you were a traveling worker or something, that you would also be excluded. So it's just for short-term stays.
Yeah, correct.
It's cover like Airbnbs, VRBO, stuff like that. Does that fall under one of these?
Yeah, so that got added in 2019.
Okay.
When they added in the language for, I don't have that in here specifically, but where it added in, actually it is the last part of the next bullet point where it talks about bed and breakfast, resorts, ranches and villas. The part at the end of that, rooms in a house, condominium, or apartment, that was what was added in 2019. Okay, so that would cover that. There's some exceptions to that. It's if it's like less than 15 days for the entire year, I believe it gets exempted. If you're owner occupied, then it would be exempted as well. But for the most part, they did try to capture those in 2019. So then on the non-uniform innkeepers, there is more flexibility in what you would want to include in there. All of the current statutes include hotels, motels, and inns, as well as that last item that we just talked about, rooms in a house, condominium, or apartment. And then it varies at that point in time. So you've got other areas where cottages, tents, or fixed trailers have been included, campsites, regardless of amenities, have been cited. And then space in camper parks and trailer parks, where it falls into that 30 days or less category.
Most likely see less income generated from the other areas, just due to the fact that it's gonna be obviously less.
Yeah.
Camping on weekends, stuff like that, so. I'm not so sure what our campgrounds would have been doing lately, and is there anything saying that state parks are exempt?
I was gonna ask that too. Or our own campgrounds, fairgrounds, it's getting year round now, it's an online thing, people pull in, hey, it's a credit card. Oh, yeah, there's. I think, well,
I'd have to look at the state campground. The other one, I mean, if you're paying by like a credit card and the credit card provider is the one that would submit the revenue, so that I don't think the county one would be exempt. The state, I'll look to see if it'll start with others.
I got a question. If they, say the county is uniform, meter tax, at some point, can they switch and ask to go to the non-uniform?
You would have to go through the.
I mean, the legislative process, but I mean, if you go down one avenue, is it, are you locked in forever? You can't switch that?
I didn't see anything in there that talks about that. I think it's just you would have to repeal the one and then enact
The
the
process
other.
with that.
Yeah. I would have to look at the question about the state park, if that's something.
There is just a state park out, the DNR park, that, I don't know, LaSalle doesn't have an additional. Yeah, but they have Campton.
No.
Just a little slew, I think, is the only probably state, but we do have a state park there.
Trying to think when I did campgrounds in the past, if there was a fee added on or not, I can.
Let's turn the page. There's a couple others up in Lincoln Township that that's getting there.
That's true. They
And that
would
was all
apply
talked
to them.
about. There was also talk 6 years ago when we addressed this, that you could exempt by size, that just throwing out number 50 campsites or less. Am I correct?
Yeah, so
Did we
the,
talk about that?
yeah, so, Elkhart's an example of that. In Elkhart statute, it's anything that has 30 rooms or less is exempted from the statute.
And I assume you could do that with your campgrounds too.
So you could set a size limit.
And does that have, can we do that in the uniform one, or does that have to be?
No, the uniform one, it's all in.
So you'd have to go through the non-uniform.
Correct.
If you wanted to exempt.
So I think something to think about, like, I'm way more excited about the ticket tax or the event tax or whatever, but the innkeeper's tax, even though it's maybe not generating a lot of money, that could be ways that we could sustain the George A project as a visitor center, right, whatever, and I think possibly the fair, right?
Well, I think
Both of those, yeah, I think both
Yeah,
of
so
those.
that would be additional funds if you go to support those two types of.
So I think so. Economic development, they're supportive of all the town festivals and things. I
Sure.
think all that money go that way.
Yeah, so I'm more excited about the ticket tax. I think like the racetrack, like what do we really get from them, right? You know, and then if Marbella comes through and there's big events there and you're getting so much per ticket.
Yeah.
So I'll let him go on his presentation, but I kind of want to get there.
In other words, let's move on.
Well, by that example, if our Bella comes through and there's a lot of hotel growth, things like that, this would benefit us.
Audience fee regard,
If they build on the outside.
Right.
What's that?
Yeah, that's one reason I don't have revenue estimates in here.
Yeah.
One of the things is because when we've talked to them before, it's kind of like, well, it might be in Newton, it might be in Jasper, what the hotels are gonna do. So that would be a big, that'd be a big impact, which both side of the line it goes on. So another potential local tax, that I just threw in was food and beverage tax. It's a 1% tax, which is on, different types of food and beverage. It's collected at the same time as sales tax. When it first was enacted, it required a specific project and then would expire at the end of that project. The recent last 5-6 years, food and beverage taxes have had much more flexibility in them. Where it's not tied to a specific project, so it's gonna become a little bit more flexible for communities. And we use it on a lot of economic development projects, special police cars, things like that, so it has some flexibility to it.
This is for retail, prepared food, not grocery store food, correct?
Some items at a grocery store would fall under it.
But for the most part, it's restaurant.
Think restaurants, yeah.
But, and then some prepared food, like buy a rotisserie chicken or something, that maybe that would be under this, but for the most part, the average grocery person, they're not gonna pay the 1%.
Correct, it gets even into, it has to have like 2 or more types of ingredients, and then there's certain ingredients that fall into the category of what would fall under this. Certain types of foods would not fall under it, so there's some very much more specificity than it. Some point, if you really get interested in this, we could dive into it.
Did they set that up to be similar to what the state did or the state sales tax on grocery items? Currently are,
Similar,
there's some
Yeah.
things that you can't, they can't tax you on, majority you can't.
yeah, it's like if something is a third ingredient in a type of a food, then the sales tax goes on it, yeah. So there is more detail on that. These do, food and beverage does have an expiration date on all the ones that I saw, which is about 20-25 years out. We'll, Henry County, theirs had an expiration date, then they re-upped it, so there is that possibility as well, but.
So a food and beverage that will go on to every restaurant in the county, every
So, yeah,
festival, the fair, those vendors.
anywhere where you're, yeah. And then they would submit it like they would submit with sales tax information. And that's one where you could administer at the local level, if Johnson County does their own, or they can be handled at the state. I would probably lean towards just having it handled at the state. With the sales tax, I don't think the treasurer is probably gonna wanna start dealing with this. I will say, if you did do the food and beverage tax, probably after the first 3 or 4 months, I would recommend you ask the state for a list who's paying taxes. Because we've had situations where people have been just missed, whether it's they didn't know about it or they just decided I'm not gonna charge it until somebody tells me to charge it. But we've had that before, where then the community went through and said, you missed this restaurant, you missed this guy. And the state made sure that they were paying taxes. So that would be one you'd want to double check.
Is that one a legislative one, or that's just a,
This is legislative as well.
okay,
We've been arguing for home rule for about 20 years at the state, so you could just enact these. But that's not been allowed to.
Let me ask you this, is there any possibility of all these different forms of keepers and food and beverage and anything else to be done at once for the legislative side?
They would each, you could do them at the same time. What's interesting is food and beverage and innkeepers fall under the same code site. So it would all be 6-9, 18, and then whatever it is. But you would most likely have Newton County Food and Beverage, Newton County Innkeepers tax.
So you could do the food and beverage under the local.
Food and beverage also has to go to state. You could do the innkeepers as the local uniform tax. You could do the food and beverage going to the state, or you could go to the state for both of them at the same, you could go at the same time.
But the local food and beverage is not an option.
Correct. You can't just get together here and enact that you have to go to the state. They'll add you to the list. That'll say Newton County food and beverage.
If we do go to the state, did we hire a consultant to represent us or something like that, or?
That's where it would be typically one of the larger law firms is who did the legislative work. I mean, we've worked with those, Ice Miller, Barnes.
If we go that route, is that something your firm does?
We would, sometimes we've helped with numbers, you know, do estimates for you, but we don't get involved with like writing the legislation or that. I would highly recommend you use counsel that goes to the legislative process on that.
And that would be good. Basically submit everything that needs to be submitted.
They would work with you on the timelines. I mean, what do you have to do locally? What do you have to do? State, I mean, first you have to get it approved at the state and then it would come back where get the fiscal body can put, you know, the food and beverage in place. It would go that route. But they would work with you on the timing of that and probably have good suggestions on better refined suggestions on your question. When do we start? They may know like what reps are helpful in this process to get something passed. So then the remainder of the discussion is really, I talked to Jeff about Mike about some of these things yesterday, just trying to figure out what other types of revenue sources out there for the project that we could look at. And so these would also all require going to the state to get legislation enacted. You see a common theme. But what I have, and there isn't something where it's like, this is the exact model, go ahead and use this, just given property. But what I did find were a number of different types of emissions taxes. And we'll talk through a couple of those. That I think are good examples. So I would look at these kind of examples. You're gonna see, you can tell that it's very similar as far as, you know, how does it get enacted? What does it exclude? You could choose to change those. How is the tax administered? We have percentages, we have flat fees, so there's both that have been enacted before in the state, so. I think this does show that there is the possibility to put a ticket tax in place. For the facility. So we can just kind of talk through these. So the first one is Marion County admissions tax. So this is for really the downtown area, any of the sporting events done at Lucas Oil and Gainbridge. So anybody that has a ticket is going to be charged the tax. And for theirs, it's 5%. Every ticket gets a 5% tax added to it. They do have an exclusion for things that are sponsored by educational institutions or associations, religious events, charitable organizations, or political organizations. And that is all up to how you're writing it, what you would want to include or not include for that, or if any of that. And that area does change from each of these taxes that we looked at. As far as how it's collected, they're all the same in this manner. It's basically at the same time, you pay $100 for a ticket, you're paying 5% tax on top of that at that point in time. It's very straightforward. It goes to the state. The State Department of Revenue would send that back to whatever board or unit you would have that would be the facilitator for it. So here, where the county treasurer would come back to, I believe.
Were there limitations on what that can be spent on then, when that money comes back to us?
So, yeah, so the only one that didn't have limitation was for the Marion County, where it went to the Marion County Capital Improvement Board, and I think that's because the board itself is limitation, so they didn't lay out the limitations in statute. But you would put in, what are the uses for that? And as we go through the rest of these, you'll see there's varying degrees, and I summarized it.
Yeah.
So I summarized, but there's varying degrees of detail on what it could be used for. Like one of them was about that long and covered the same thing as something that covered 2 pages.
It's not fixed in stone, it's whatever you apply for, it gets.
So this really is, this is where you would craft this to what Newton County wants.
Okay.
So these are just examples, and I can send along each of the different statutes for these, so you can kind of see how they're different, how they've evolved. And the way they do it with these taxes, it won't say Newton County admissions tax. It'll say county with between this many and this many people. It'll be a general kind of description of the area. So to get to the specific sports complex, it would be a way to define it. So you would talk about its population, the area of this. You'll just, if you look at the statute, it's not as easy as just saying we're gonna put a tax in place for this facility. Cause each one of these, like, the next one's the Hendricks County admissions tax. It's for an amusement park that never happened. But it just talks about any tickets offered for sale to the public for the privilege of attending an amusement park. And then it talks about it further in statute, population range, the county with this many people. So you have to read through that and you figure out, okay, this is what it's for. But it's very specific. So under this one, that's $1 per ticket. So that's a flat fee, every ticket, regardless of the cost, it's $1 for that. As far as the uses for that one, that's financial assistance, including grants, loans, guarantees for private enterprise to complete economic development projects in the county. Also allowed for some operating expenses related to, working on those economic development projects. And the next one's an entertainment facility admissions tax. And so this one is for 50 cents for each paid admission to an event. This is for the facility in Noblesville, the concert facility in Noblesville. That one talks about construct costs to construct, reconstruct, improve public thoroughfares, to improve access to the facility, and can also be used to pay basically debt service related to those projects. There's a sports complex one as well, which I don't think I've put in place either. 5% of the cost of admission. And it lays out. So this just gives you an idea. In the Performing Arts Center in Brown County, that's $1 for price of admission. And then the last one was just a motorsports admission fee. You can guess where this was at. It's 2 to 6%, depending on the cost of admission, and it's only on race days. So. And then same thing there, where it basically talked about it. That one was very specific, where it's used just for bonds.
So if there's no bonds paid off, then they don't collect the tax.
Correct. For this one, it's really just for debt service.
So you're crafting the ask based off your situation.
Correct. Yeah, so I mean, it's good flexibility when we kind of looked at these, at least for the ticket price. There's other areas. I think one of the items was like products that they sell.
Yeah, we were just looking at pretty much any goods or services, like some of their term fees or camp fees and things like that besides the daily events. We're just looking at all those different items.
Yeah, kind of on the sales use tax side, that may be more difficult just because the state has not allowed like a local sales tax, which I think that would more thought about it. That would kind of fall into the sales use tax category. Now that doesn't mean we can't ask for it. If we want to add, that be on top of it, or if there's a way that we could in this legislation craft that kind of is also an admission type B. That's where I think we'd have to get legal counsel involved as far as getting creative on terminology and what we could.
Well, and you're gonna have to have a state legislator, state senator then.
And then we're gonna have to,
They have to carry it.
they have to carry it and explain it.
Hire every lawyer in the state, but if don't have
Well, that-
support in the state house.
Yeah, for
Or even
any of
get it
these
on.
things,
Yeah.
state house assistants you're gonna have to have, and that's where they're gonna have to be able to explain it to somebody that's from Clark County, what the project are you talking about? But that's where reiterating, it's the locals wanna. And people are gonna be paying this will be people traveling in from out of state, locales. But that's where you have to sell your local rep first. On it, and then you have to then get others at the state house to buy into it.
What is the downfalls to trying to get this passed in the state? And what kind of hurdles here? Did Marion County have a hard time getting it? Did Hendricks County, Jasper, I would presume Jasper behind this.
I mean, we weren't involved in any of those as far as getting passed, but I think it comes down to you have. Some people that will vote against any type of tax anywhere, any fees. Right? They don't care, it doesn't affect them, will never impact them, will be against it. And then it's just a matter of getting it to where people are willing to put it into one of the, these usually come up in where it's like a bill that has a number of these types of pieces to it. So you need to get it in there. So you always run the risk that it gets attached to a bill, it gets thrown out because of something else. So I don't see it that this would be a house bill by itself. It would be part of something. So you always run the risk that it's part of something. That other people don't like something else in there. And then it could get harmed that way.
So it goes to throwing in, what do they call those people bills?
What was that?
If this type of thing throws into what they call legal bills. Where they try to get something passed by putting it in another bill that will majority of like it. It's a very good chance of passing.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I call it, I would just say they just kind of lump bills together, like. Of this type or where it's. So you would be acting on a larger bill, that way, on the positive side there, then you've got these people that want. Item 1 to get passed, these people want item 2 to get passed. And yours is in there, you eventually have enough people that have. An interest to get things passed, that they'll pass it for. For you, so you pass it for, that's. Sausage getting made at that point in time.
Like the innkeeper's tax, if you go with the uniform and it's tax, that's
That's
just done.
that's you guys have an 2-page ordinance and you put the
So
uniform in
like
place.
Jasper County, I'm not guarantee you that's, I don't know that. That's probably what they,
I do understand, so what fair came around 617, all that makes sense.
I don't know, I don't think so.
I think campsites are, unless you go to non-uniform.
Well, I want to get clarification on that, because we looked at this before.
I just don't know, this, I don't, apartment says uniform is blah, blah, blah.
Well, what,
Then you go to non-uniform, that's where it says campsites, tent, civic trailers.
well, that's where the state has further definition of those 7 categories. So there's 7 categories where it says hotels and hotels, inns and what have you. And they further clarified, well, that also includes, that means bed and breakfast and whatever. What we couldn't find is a campground with a fallen like tourist cabin category. And last time we kind of got multiple answers from the state on that. And I mean, part of the confusion, they could have been looking at one of the statutes that was specific versus the uniform, so I can revisit that with them. Very specifically, we're talking uniform tax. What would fall under that?
I think that for what it's worth, we could start with the innkeeper's tax under the counties. Yeah, but what really entices me about this whole thing is if Marbella does come through, it'd be a good amount of money made from that too.
And I know skiers are ticket.
Well, yeah, both, but the ticket sales, I could, good.
Because they're two separate things, right?
Right. And the other one, you have to go through the legislative process.
The standard one, aren't we limited as what we could spend it for? It's to encourage conventions, tourism. Yeah, so I don't know how much it's gonna benefit the county. I'd rather see it offset our bigger revenue landfills like that.
But I don't know if you're ever gonna be able to even legislatively get that done. To put it back. in.
But the visitor center, like at.
But I think you could do that.
I think we probably could.
I think, I think so. I don't know.
If that goes towards the tourism, would that not be part of what Mike's doing? So would that offset some of the money that goes towards economic development?
So here's
Free up
the,
some of that?
a little further definition on what convention, so. So money in the convention visitor and tourism promotion fund, that's what you'd have to create under the uniform code. May be expended to promote and encourage conventions, visitors and tourism within the county. The expenditures under this subsection may include, but are not limited to. The expenditures for advertising, promotional activities, trade shows, special events and recreation.
Special events, sounds like we got everything.
Yeah.
And remember, this also says, not limited to, so,
Oh, not,
so it might be even,
like,
you have to be able to make a straight faced argument that what you're doing is promoting, encouraging convention and visitor tourism in the county, which this whole project is that by definition.
Got a question over here. Having looked at Marion, I see this is excludes events sponsored by educational institution or association, but Marbella's would be an association.
Well, no, Marbella is a lot of the things that they're going to be having there are going to be put on by associations.
So that is all custom language.
That's okay.
That is.
Saw the ice.
Yeah, that's not the uniform one, that's the one they went to the legislation. Get specific.
Yeah, we don't have to follow the variance.
Because there isn't a uniform one for a ticket price. No.
That's
has to be
custom.
done- All has to be done for your specific. Through the.
Yeah, so a lot of them had the language where it said it excluded an event sponsored by an educational institution or an association representing an educational institution. Events sponsored by a religious organization, a charitable organization. And then a political organization. A lot of them have that language, they don't all have that language.
So what you said, the Marion, that's what Marion put in there,
That's what Marion has.
you don't have to.
No,
So that's-
I think if you're gonna go to it, this should be crafted. For you.
yeah. Now that could be where you start to craft it and a rep says, well, but you should exclude.
Right.
This type of organization, so. You may have some of those types of organizations that, another one excluded. I think it was for the concert one and one of the other, the team sports one where. They have some events where it's pay by car, but $10 a car, that was excluded as well. I don't think that would not that would be one you probably would not have put into this one. But yeah, it's all custom when you get to the admissions ones.
Have we used those in the February? Scott? I think so.
And Ice Miller and the county is
He's done stuff with many of that.
about everybody that, at some point. Probably depend on what the part of that.
Lots to consider. It's kind of scary that you, well, talk about that later, but thank you.
But, I mean, it's just this new thing real simple that it just say, we're gonna collect some money
Or guaranteed.
or guarantee.
But, you know, at least we know if we're gonna have any kind of hurdles where they're not gonna be. More so with our local reps. Yeah, well, they're gonna support it.
We are better informed. Thank you very much.
Well, and you know, and this is one of those things that sometimes it takes more than one session to get it passed as well.
Right.
So. When we've worked, when we had to do, before they had the correctional lit piece that was available, we had to go for every jail project, if you wanted to get a special rate. And that would take sometimes 2 or 3 years to get that rate in place. So it's one of those that you may have to start laying the foundation. So the sooner the better that you
Want
start
to
talking
consider
to
it
people.
formally a committee? Like. I thought they just gotta be in charge of.
Delve a little deeper into it,
It's a,
to delve a little deeper into it, get some of those questions. I'd probably be everything.
And we can work with legal counsel, then when we can work with Marvella as far as estimates.
yeah,
As we kind of go forward, but. A little bit more granular.
That's something to take a while too, is we might not know, this development margin is actually, you know, operation.
Yeah, with the phases and which phases of the ticket tax really. Impact.
So if we could start with the innkeeper's tax and get that rolled now. The others later.
They're all independent of each other.
And the innkeepers, I mean, I think I've been perceived against that. I really haven't. It was just not dollars. It's just, it wasn't not gonna be a fix all for
No.
everything we have.
Or to some extent, I was just saying.
But I think it's a good thing to have. I mean, probably only one hotel or a couple in the county that would be affected. And maybe some campgrounds, I'm not sure, but it's kind of a why not kind of a zone. It's not huge money, but I'm sure we'll find a place to spend it.
Well, we give the county fair, but you cover that.
If it can go to the fair, if it can go to these town festivals.
Yeah, I can free up those dollars for something else or.
The health department's gonna be cut by $200,000.
Where we're gonna go, but it-
Well, that's the money we're giving the fair, the money we're giving to this. If you
Right.
do That, then
That's all grant money. You have to put it back in your tax dollar, but we get grant money, that'll offset the health department for quite a few years.
Well, the way I look at it, it's just that it's preparedness for the inevitable.
yeah,
So. It'll help, it don't take that much more off our shoulder.
Mike, Carl, did you have any specific clarifications for?
no, we had a good conversation yesterday, and I'm glad he provided some examples and. For project, stuff like that, so I feel pretty good about it.
You had questions about directions for him to look into anything else,
I will look into the campsite, try to get a
clarification or some of that.
you know, I'm not against everything. There's campsites.
I don't know as I have either, but
You may get the question, so you might as well know the answer.
I think that was the big pushback with our conversation quite a few years ago, when they all came in. Was that they were adamantly against it, but then I think it it was after the fact, maybe, it was like some of them wouldn't have even been
Categorized,
right.
yeah.
I think Pioneer may have been one of them, because I don't think they hit the threshold of what. Like how many campsites they had, and like you were talking about the yurts or whatever they had there, was it there? It was one of them. And then I
Length of
think,
Stay as well,
right, and then I think Port Delu,
just God knows.
right,
Yeah, he was here.
right. But I think some of those, it was the afterwards, it was then found that they wouldn't have even fallen into where they would have had to impose that.
Yeah, I think the length of stay is confusing for some, because, you know, you may have like, oh, they're here for 6 months, 9 months, well, they're not gonna fall in their,
But if you're at a hotel, it's making, you know, in one account, you got the window, people from Benton County going up. Just, you're really gonna mess around and not collect it because they're there for 30 days. You're gonna charge the letter.
Christine, could you,
That makes sense.
could you talk about the hotel stays? You referred to that to me once about staying more than 30 days is not allowed at a hotel, or what was your experience in your previous?
So in a previous, municipality that I worked from, we did have our hotel inspection and stuff, and we were trying to work on some kind of ordinance or something to the fact, I think Maryville passed something to where long-term stays at a hotel would not be allowed, because if it's more than 30 days, they would have to install sprinkler systems and stuff, or for the fire marshal, state fire marshal, stuff like that. Because what's going on is because of the homeless situation and stuff like that, these hotels or smaller chain hotels, these privately developed, individually owned hotels are using them as a apartment complex type situation. We're trying to long-term. What we had with a lot of these hotels and stuff in our municipalities, we made them make the people who are staying quote unquote more than a week switch around rooms. This way they couldn't get comfortable and present fire hazards, and the fire hazards we ran into were hoarding situations where fire EMS could not get in with a stretcher or anything like that. Sanitation issues, because they're not the parking-based complex, you know, people are cooking with burners and stuff like that, causing the fire. I do know our other municipality also charge increase tax for Airbnbs and stuff.
yeah, that would be,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's one way. The motels, yeah, it's a touchy situation because there's nothing, I don't think there's anything in the state legislation. I think it'd have to be done by the county or municipality. Where these hotels are to force like less than 30 days stay.
But I don't even know if the hotel would realize it's been 45 days, I don't tax, I'm guessing they're gonna, it taxes 5% a day. Yeah,
Be less work.
So what is the process if you should decide we want to do a uniform?
I think it's the fiscal body passes an ordinance, and I can send a sample ordinance up to Linda. If you want to see a few of them. Or I think it really is like 2 pages.
And then it's passive and
And then it would be. Let me see if there's a uniform date that it goes into effect, or if it's a certain number of days after. Well, rather than me try to find that sitting here, I'll send Linda an email with all that information in it.
would you kind of need to know what the process is and should
All you
decide?
gotta do, like she said, the standard for ordinance. Everybody's in this act.
Sure.
Just looking at some of these, it looks like. As far as the date to put them in effect, you would have control over them. A lot of them are January 1st, but not all. January 1st and July 1st seem to be popular choices.
Oh, it's the fiscal year starts at that, makes it easier.
Yeah, you gotta get through everything.
And I noticed in the 6-9 Jasper County, they have it repealed as of July 1st, 2045. So they actually put it in.
So they put an end date for their innkeepers also.
So as you know, that's another. You would think.
Right.
I'll look to see if the other ones have that as well.
I think I saw Edwards County have, maybe. I don't know, I got out of it.
Yeah, Clark Floyd did not have one.
Anything else?
All right, thank you.
Thank
you.
Everything. Thanks, Brian.
Brian,
Thank you.
Oh, really?
I mean, I'm sorry she left, and I know I'm sounding dumb. But so property tax are going down, right? That's a bill. Are you paying property tax or?
Yes, sure.
So how do we go from 2025 to 6,183?
What page?
I wish she had left. I should have caught it. That's what property taxes. So the 2025, our property taxes, net property taxes includes property taxes and personal property for 6.18 million. Everything's going down, where there's a 2.9 in personal property taxes. How are we gonna come up with 6.6 2020? If everything's going down. We're paying less property taxes, no personal property taxes. How is that number possible? Am I not seeing?
Because of the 4%
Yeah,
growth
4%
rate
growth is
on
what
the
you-
levy and the,
Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
the assessed evaluation's going down, but the rate's gonna go up.
Yeah, so everybody's gonna pay actually more property taxes.
Maybe not everybody, some, yes. I mean, it'll depend on where your personal net evaluation falls into the formula.
Trying to say, no, Bill, it's supposed to go with property taxes. We'll make it property taxes.
Well, there's your deductions, so certain property classes, 1% and 2%, and they have the deduction benefits. Which is gonna cause your tax rate to go up. As your levy goes up, your tax rate goes up to 3% category. You'll pay more taxes.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand this.
Well,
With this number.
Well, the 1% and 2%. I mean, it'll go down, but. We'll see how much and what the offsets, it's gonna be all about offsets and. And what do those deductions end up doing to your different assessed value classes, and what does the levy look like?
I just, I'm having a hard time grasping how the numbers go up.
Well, if we didn't have the legislation, that number would go up probably more,
It would be going up more,
Okay. I'm just trying.
but the rate would come down.
but the rate, I guess that, actually. The levy may not go up more, actually, it's just that. The rate would be different because your assessed value would be higher, so your rate would be lower, so your circuit breaker would be low.
I'm just trying to understand.
But it's still an unknown, as Susan mentioned, with how they're gonna treat levy growth. Kind of important to know that.
so even when I was an auditors
Yes.
last week, Department of Local Government, the DLGF, like, they were stopping at the year 2027. Like, they're projecting clear out to 29 into 2030. But they're kind of just stopping because they're waiting to see what the next 2 years really does. So we know there's changes, but we can't tell you what they are because we gotta see what this affects the next 2 years. Yeah, there is.
Correct, but I just don't see how they come up with the numbers.
Like you said, no, it just, it's projected. It's not.
So if you take take a 4% increase in your levy from that 25 number of 6.2. The next 3 years at 4% each year, and that compounds, that puts you at your 7.1. So we're gonna collect our levy. It's gonna, it'll be, the rate's gonna change, which is on that one graph she showed how the rate's gonna go up because our valuation's gone down. The dollars,
Understand that, all
the
right?
dollars don't, because of the levy, and the levy is the maximum you can collect.
Yeah, what changes is like what your circuit breaker impact
With-
may
with
be.
the circuit breaker
your net
impact.
limit.
Hard to grasp.
A lot of
It's, you gotta sit through several of these, I mean, I was anyway, just talk whatever.
When I say that you're charging more percentage on less value, I get that, but when we're losing half or almost half over here, think of that number with that. You see what I'm saying?
I mean, your rate could go up
Substantial.
considerably, if there's no limit on what your rate can do from year to year.
Right.
So it could, if you lost 20% of your assessed value, you could have, it's not that easy, but you could have 20% increase in your rate.
I think sometimes,
So now give me a class on this. I've heard.
you need a better teacher than me. I kind of understand it, but I should not, well, not hard today.
I can give you some names and you can look up.
I'm not sure I want to go in.
I mean, you gotta talk to Brian and Susan for a number of years, and then you kind of. It kind of.
Well, then they go to the state this year.
Yeah.
Say it's a whole lot.
Are we looking at the statute?
Whatever you guys wanna do.
I'll deduct it, not the credits.
That's the bias, so much every time.
So what do we wanna do here, guys?
Is something to count for, or it's just doing both,
For,
connecting it, careful, and
I think it's strictly a council, innkeeper's tax is strictly a council. I mean, they're the ones that have to do the ordinance and all that, I think, is that correct?
Correct, I think the
Commissioners
commissioners
involved.
get involved with setting up the board that have the, but should do an act that is council.
No, that's what when you said, when the example of an ordinance. You can throw something together before it's still bad. And we'll review it in the next meeting and then,
Decide. Anything else? No questions, Steve? Gonna go home and study it? Yeah. So, if there is no other questions, anybody else have any questions up there? Mike, Carl, you guys good? You can adjourn? Motion, Tom. Second by Matt. To adjourn, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed. Council is adjourned.
Motion. Aye, sir.
Second.
Motion from Steve, second from Ralph, to it. Choose the round there, yeah, I know.
Yeah. It's a lot of podcasts required.
But yeah,
Dolores just said she's still.
Do you, Matt does that?
Most of us ag.
These are all these kind of stuff, while I go in the shop, you know, radio used to always have music on it now. It's